Hi, everyone. Mr. Townsend here,
Mr. Laughlin over here.
and we want to share with you our pictures from the Sedlec Ossuary, otherwise known as the Bone Church in Kutna Hora. And Mr. Laughlin, where is Kutna Hora?
This is in Czechia.
For sure. We had a great time. And this totally ties into our conversations about pestilence and plague, and of course, the Black Death. And thanks for watching this. And here we go. Let me make this a little bigger. All right. Well, the Sedlec Ossuary, Mr. Laughlin, Kevin, what am I looking at right here?
So this is what's really cool about this church is they use the bones of the deceased as decorations. And so this is one of the many different ways they use a skull, and I'm going to guess that's probably a thigh bone, to actually create art out of these body parts instead of just painting. They use the bones.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what that is. So a little history behind this place before we get into it. So 20 years ago, I worked in a store with a guy who had spent some time in the Czech Republic. He'd spent like a year there backpacking and stuff. Back then it was called Czech Republic, today Czechia. And he one day he was telling me all about this bone church. And as he was telling me about it, I couldn't stop listening, and I just kept asking questions. And what he was describing was an ossuary, which is a room in which the bones of dead people are placed. But this ossuary was entirely decorated with the bones of human beings. And I was both grossed out, but really, really curious. And I told myself one day I'm going to the Czech Republic to see this. And thankfully, Mr. Laughlin was able to join me on that experience. What do we got here, Mr. Laughlin?
That outside of the building, and it was interesting that it looks like they were doing some renovations to the outside while we were there. And what I found interesting, like when you hear the title Bone Church, like in my head, that paints a picture of kind of like what you would see in the catacombs of like Italy or France, where it's floor to ceiling piles of bones. I was kind of expecting the church or the ossuary itself to be made like instead of using bricks out of bones, and that's not what it was. Instead, it was just, plaster like a normal church would be. And so it was interesting to see that they were doing those renovations while we were there. And as you can tell from both of the pictures, it was a beautiful day outside, not too hot.
No, it was, yeah, the weather was gorgeous. And it was fun to take a bunch of Laguna people there. For a sense of geography, here's Czechia next to Germany, Poland, Austria, Prague being the capital. It was a good 45 minutes outside of town. Continuing on with the history, maybe Mr. Laughlin can read this to us.
Let me move your picture. There we go. The ossuary is located, as we said, in the small Czech town of Kutna Hora. The trip was 45 minutes. It didn't seem that long, but it was 45 minutes out of the way in kind of the countryside. The history of this place is you can see those beautiful bone decorations. In 1278, a monk, I think we are a little bit slow. I think my computer is catching up.
Yeah, it'll catch up.
There we go. Okay. So in 1278, a monk by the name of Henry, the abbot of Sedlec, took a trip to the Holy Land, and when he was leaving Jerusalem, he took with him a handful of earth from Golgotha, said to be the location where Jesus was crucified. And he took that dirt and he sprinkled it over the cemetery of Sedlec Monastery. Because of this, the cemetery itself became famous throughout all of Central Europe. And many people, because of kind of that fame, wanted to be buried there. And the burial ground was enlarged during the bubonic plague in the 14th century, which you've heard Mr. Townsend and I talking about this week.
Yeah, and these pictures here, this is what you see when you first go down the steps. Because when you first go in the building, it's just like a normal church. But then you go down these steps, and this is the first thing we see. Everybody stops to take a picture. And do you remember there was a sign that says no stopping for pictures?
Yeah, there were a lot of signs all over this Europe that said no stopping for pictures, and we did. But like as you can see in those pictures, how do you not stop and take a picture? Like you have to take a picture of that.
Right, and just as a reminder for all of you that watching, these are real human skulls, real human femurs. Everything you're seeing here is 100% real human bone. Uh, so a little more on the history, a couple of pictures of the graveyard outside. So the graveyard did eventually fill up, but more and more people were arriving throughout the centuries to be buried there because this was said to have the dirt from where Jesus died. So eventually they had to start placing the bodies in the ossuary, which is underneath the chapel. And by the mid 1800s, the ossuary was full of bodies. They just couldn't store anybody else in there, and they needed to do something with the bones. So in 1870, with the blessing of the Catholic Church, they asked this guy, whose name is František Rint, or Fran Rint, uh, they hired him to arrange the bones into interesting creations to honor the dead. And that's exactly what he did. Let's get into some pictures. So here we have 3 pictures. I know Mr. Laffin's computer will keep up in just a sec. Pictures taken from the inside, huge, massive collections of skulls here. And on top of this are just the different ends of bones, the ends of arm bones, the end of leg bones. Mr. Laffin, what's your impression of this picture here in the center?
My computer has not caught up yet. Is that the one we're talking about? Is that the, oh, there we are. Now we're officially caught up. The one in the center, if you look at the one on the left, that's what I was expecting the whole church to look like. But on the right, or not the right, the middle, that's more of what the entire ossuary looks like. It had these beautiful arrangements of these bones. And I don't know about you, but when I heard the title Bone Church, I was expecting something, you know, kind of gross or kind of off-putting or creepy. But you can see, and we'll talk about this in a later slide, the bones are very clean. They're not bloody, they're not gross, they don't, you know, look like a zombie film. They're very well taken care of and clean and arranged in a way that is both beautiful and honors the dead.
Yeah, I agree with that, everything you said. And the rack, the picture on the right, the rack there, these were skulls that apparently could not be used. They were trying to show like how some of the victims who came here were killed through trauma, like head wounds, probably from war or battle. So you know, we don't necessarily have to discuss how these holes and cracks in the skulls got there, but we could only imagine it was probably a very unpleasant experience for the people who suffered those. Let's go to the next slide. I know Mr. Laffin will catch up in a minute. So here we have an image of the famous chandelier. This is one of the 2 things that a lot of people want to see when they go here. And a reminder, these are all real human bones. Spinal bones, leg bones, there's other small little bones here, finger bones, toe bones, all pelvic bones, scapula, your shoulder blades, all used to construct this. And Rint, the woodworker, he sanitized and bleached all the bones before using them. This working chandelier, working means this is a functional chandelier, it still works. In the center of the room, it draws everyone's attention. And the details he got through the use of human bones is incredible. Mr. Laffin?
This picture especially reminds me of, like, there were a couple students who kind of toured the ossuary with me, and this is one of the places that we just kind of stopped and looked. Like, if you've ever seen, I'll use the Where's Waldo books. If you've ever read those books, you're looking for Waldo, but while you're doing that, you're seeing all of these actually silly details in those books. Here in the church, like, you get that kind of grand picture of the chandelier, but the closer you get, the more details you find. And, you know, Mr. Townsend just named all of those bones. Well, we're sitting there and we're looking at the chandelier, finding all those little bones. You can kind of see in the picture, the one that's on the right-hand side, above kind of the skulls and the bones, you can see different details. It was super interesting to see how they're using these same bones in different ways throughout the ossuary. And something that big, like a chandelier, it was really impressive.
That's a good term. And you mentioned, you know, touring with different groups of students. We broke off into small teams, but nobody was talking. It was very quiet and respectful in there. That's one of my memories.
Yeah.
Yeah. Next, we have 3 more pictures. On the left, massive collection of just bones and skulls that weren't necessarily used in any artwork, but were still honored by being displayed. A sign, of course, saying "No touching, don't try to reach through." Um, Mr. Laffin, have you caught up yet?
Yeah.
Okay. So to prove that it was a real church, of course, we have the altar or the shrine to Jesus. And then over here was a cool grave. Like there were actually headstones down in there. When you saw this big collection of bones, Mr. Lapham, what was going through your mind?
I mean, obviously it's impressive. It's just to see the bones kind of that way was impressive. And it was interesting to think that people actually essentially gave their bodies to build this. For me, I know the group I was with, like Mr. Townsend said, there was no talking. We did a little bit of whispering only because we were trying to figure out what was going on in the left-hand side picture. Because for us, it looked like a room, like maybe there was a room inside of it. So we're thinking maybe it's, I don't know what religion they practice in this church, but maybe it was like some sort of confessional or like a side chapel or something. And we couldn't stop our wonderment and our awe in there, even, in the face of all those bones.
I'm glad you brought that up, asking about the religion. They're Roman Catholic, which I know some students were surprised because in American Roman Catholic, they would never think to display bones like this. But it's very much the same Catholic religion that's practiced all throughout the world, even here at the mission in San Luis Obispo, just practiced a little differently.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because my classes, you'll all know, for those of you who have me as well, we just studied Edgar Allan Poe, and so we talked about how, kind of his own plague, tuberculosis, affected him. And between Poe and looking at the ossuary, it got me thinking about how different cultures, I'll say, react to death. Like in the Latino culture, which I appreciate so much, they have Dia de los Muertos, which is a beautiful celebration of those who have passed, and it involves lots of color and welcoming those spirits back. It's kind of similar to what's in this church, where they are honoring these people by using their bones in a beautiful way. A lot of us would tend to think, oh, this is so macabre, and macabre is a great word to describe things or situations that are maybe scary or involved with death or violence. And that was my impression going in, is like, oh, is this going to be something, macabre and dark? And it really wasn't. And so that difference in how these religions, same religion, how in Czechia they display the bones, and in America we wouldn't do that. We have different views and different practices revolving around death.
What a great tie-in. Thanks for sharing all of that. Next, we have just a couple of pictures, another focus in on one of the skulls, but then near the chandelier, there were these little towers with candelabras. A candelabra is where you would put a candle in, of just these skulls. Mr. Laffin, has your screen caught up?
Yeah.
What do you make of the little figure sitting on top of all of these skulls?
Of all things in this ossuary, that was the creepiest thing. Like, and those who have me for English know that I'm not bothered by like skulls and bones and what people would like macabre, again, we'll use that word. But those little cherubs, and they weren't intentionally creepy, they just were. My group, we were talking about the candelabras, and we would have loved to see, like, I can imagine how beautiful this ossuary would be lit by thousands of candles. Like, it would be just this, if you're in awe in the daylight, it would just be that much more incredible with the candle light. And I just think it would be beautiful.
I love that. Yes, absolutely. Everything you said. That was the creepiest thing I saw the whole time we were there. So here we got some more pictures. Some might know a student named Sai standing on top of the stairwell. There were these really cool, huge goblets. I mean, these are massive. In fact, I bought a miniature version of one for the shelf in my classroom, with these huge like goblets that can't be out from, but made of bones. And then over here we've got a few students, Brady, Brian, and even a parent who came along, Christy. But just Mr. Laffin, look at all of these bones and how the artist used them.
I love that. I love, again, the intricate details. And you'll notice, I don't think we brought this up yet, you'll notice that they're not cutting or breaking the bones in any way. They're using it in its natural form. And like for me, who's someone who doesn't, I'll say I don't think I have the artistic talent. I know it's in there somewhere, but I don't practice enough. Having to use something in its shape and form without changing it could be very frustrating for someone like me. And I bet there were frustrations there for the people who built this ossuary as well. But as you can see, they figured it out and they did it in a way that totally works.
Yeah, you're so right about that. Because you'd almost think like these here above side, these tiny little bones must be something snapped in half. And they're not. The artist just had to be creative with what he was given. And it's just so mind-boggling to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one other very famous feature is the coat of arms. And this is the coat of arms of the Schwarzenberg family, who was the rulers of this region, kind of the Austro-Hungarian Empire region at the time. They were the royal family, and Rent, the woodworker, wanted to honor them. So he recreated this in their name. On the left here, we have what the coat of arms looks like. And then here in the middle, the bone coat of arms. What did you think when you saw this, Mr. Laffin?
This was another place where, like, the couple of students who were with me and we just kind of stopped and stared in awe. Because, again, you can see all those details and you can see how they're using it. We saw this coat of arms in multiple places on this trip.
That's right.
And so it might not be an appropriate word to use, but I thought it was really cool to see it in a different art format or a different medium. And I thought it was super interesting, again, how they took what they had and they used it and kept it respectful. And we still get all those cool details in there.
Yeah, and one of the cool details is on this coat of arms, over here on the right, if you notice, it's the bird, looks like it's pecking the head of something. Well, as a tie-in to other historical events, it's actually supposed to be a raven pecking the eyeball out of a dead Mongol invader, which that's a whole creepy thing in and of itself. But look, he even recreated the bird pecking the eyeball. That is just crazy.
Yeah, the details they went into, like, I'm always impressed by artists because, again, I don't feel I have the talent because I don't practice it. Mm-hmm. So I love those little details. Like, instead of just doing a flat kind of shape, you'll notice that they did the bird, and then you kind of see, is that a log or a torch? They mimicked that with a bone on the bone version of this crest or the coat of arms. It was really interesting.
Really interesting. So, as we were winding up our trip, Mr. Laffin already said we were in small groups, and you could go up onto the roof, this kind of balcony-looking area. And some of you watching this might remember a TA from first period in the year 2019. Her name was Sydney Leonardo, and she went on the trip with us. And it was really quiet. It was just her and I up there in this kind of lonely spot. And I remember her words, and she said, she was looking out over the graveyard, over the wall, and she noticed that there's a playground over here and all of these apartments. And she says, it's so surreal. Here we are in this place of death with so many human remains. Right on the other side of that wall is a playground and houses where life happens. That doesn't happen in America. Mr. Laffin, what are your thoughts about that? That was, to me, what a beautiful acknowledgement of something very real.
Absolutely. And I think on a larger level, Sydney hit the nail on the head as to why people should travel, is to get outside of our own experiences, because I love traveling. I love going out. I love meeting the people and eating with them and hanging out and talking. And she's absolutely right. This doesn't happen in America. Again, tying back to our views on death, we don't have the same view. For them, I mean, they are a much older country, and so they have a lot more wisdom and knowledge than we do. But that sums up why I travel and I try to take every opportunity I'm given to travel, and why all of you listening, if you're ever given that opportunity to travel, especially outside of the United States, take it up and go. And if you're inspired by this slideshow, there are plenty of places Mr. Townsend and I could, suggest you go or, try. So I think Sydney is a woman well beyond her years. She's a very, very smart person and great insight into what we're looking at here.
Yeah, you're so right. And you already brought up something I think we're going to conclude with, which is the whole idea of if you ever have the opportunity to go somewhere unusual, you're reading in a guidebook, you're on vacation with a family or by yourself or with a loved one, and something odd comes up, that's the thing you should go see. As soon as I saw the word bone church in the guidebook, I made the connection to, oh my gosh, this is the thing that guy was talking about 20 years ago. It wasn't an option. I made sure the group got to go, and nobody was sad about it. Which leads into this last slide, kind of what was it like? It wasn't scary, and even Mr. Laffin acknowledged that. It it's when we talked about it later, almost everybody agreed this was in their top three favorite things we saw on the whole trip. And I think it's because it was this odd feeling of you're looking at this beautiful art, but you're also walking around real human bones, like everything around you. It's not a Halloween prop. It wasn't bought at Halloween City. Like these were real human beings who lived and laughed and loved and cried and died just like every human being. And yet, while many of us will just be interred or buried into the ground, these people, at least for the moment, are still in some ways immortal. You know what I mean, Mr. Laffin?
Yeah, and I think that ties into this larger idea of how powerful like history is these people, arguably I would say most of them probably have been forgotten in reality, because that's just the way things work. As generations come after us, our stories get smaller and smaller and smaller. Those of you who've seen Coco, kind of what happens with Hector
Yes.
will happen to all of us. But whether people use these bones, the owners of the bones or previous owners, whether they use their names or not, they're still living on, because I would guess probably millions of people come to this ossuary here to see this incredible use of different art mediums. And yeah, I think we're so used to seeing like Halloween props and bones are so associated with maybe uncomfortable or even scary or gross situations. As you've seen in all the slides here, it's not. There's nothing gross or scary or uncomfortable about this church, other than that little angel thing we were talking about. It was a really cool testament to the power of history itself.
Yeah, and there was something just really beautiful, like you said, not scary, but beautiful about being there. And someday, Mr. Laffin and I, we were talking about this the other day. We would like to repeat the whole trip. We want to take more students and be able to share this great experience with them, because we really do believe everybody should see what we saw. It's phenomenal. So that is our show on the Sedlec Ossuary, excuse me. Mr. Laffin, any final words or thoughts?
No, I think you wrapped it up well. I just, again, suggest if any of you get the chance to travel, do it. And I was like, I'm the type of person who likes to look for the weird things to go see. So what is something interesting in your travel that you can go see? And I'd say go for it. Check it out.
Yeah, before your family goes on a vacation, if you know where you're going, don't leave it up to them to plan the itinerary. Sit down at the computer and type in Czechia weird tourist things. you will find, if that's where your family's going or wherever you're going, just type in that place, weird tourism, and you will be surprised at the cool things there are to see out there. Yeah. So, Mr. Lappin, hey, thanks for sharing these slides and the memories with us. I loved traveling with you, and I can't wait to do it again.
Yes, happy to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for tuning in to see a little snapshot of our travels.
For sure. All right. Hey, we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Bye.